Okay, welcome back to how to start a restaurant business. Now that we have got a firmly defined concept, we now have to prove that concept, and we do that by completing a financial forecast. And this is probably the single most important aspect of business planning. Just like the concept drives everything forward, the financial forecast proves that what you think is a good idea is actually a viable business concept. It not only charts your first year's financial results ahead of time, it also sets targets for you going forward. Because you need to know what kind of revenues are you going to be expecting to generate. What's your cost of goods sold going to be? How much is it going to cost you for labor? What are your fixed expenses? And how much money do I expect to make? Think of all of those. All of those aspects are so important. Everything from revenue, how much money I'm going to make, all the way through to income, how much profit am I going to generate? And at the end of the day, you're not going into business to make history, you are going into business to make money. So let's talk about revenue first. The way that I set up restaurant forecasts is in the following manner. And there will be something at the end of this presentation where there in your workbook you'll see samples of a fully developed financial forecast and then a blank which you can use. But let's just talk about business first. You have to be able to project business on a slow day, an average day, and a busy day, because not every day is going to be the same. You're going to have slow days, which are, for the sake of argument, Monday, Tuesday, and then you're going to have average days, which are like Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Sunday, and then busy days, Friday, Saturday. You may have more busy days in the summertime than in the wintertime. You may have more busy days during school periods than when school is out. It all depends on what your location is. Depends on what's happening in your mall, for example. There will be busy times for the mall. Christmas time is crazy in a mall. So no matter what restaurant you've got, you're going to be busy. Now what you now have to do is that you have to project how many customers are coming in at the different times of the day, the different days of the week, the different months of the year. So you have to be able to project how many people are coming through for a lunch on a Tuesday in February. How many people are coming through to have dinner on a Friday in July? So people say to me all the time, well, how am I supposed to know that? Well, you've got to know that. You've got to go check out your competition. See what they're doing. Sit in the restaurant with your laptop, pretending to do work, and see what the customer flow is. How many people are coming in? What are they buying? What are they spending? Because you need to know the average spend as well. To be able to build a forecast, I need to know how many customers I'm having and how much they're spending. Now, you can control that. You can control that because you control pricing. But once you've settled on your pricing, you have to understand that if I do 1,000 people a week and the average spend is $15, well, I'm going to do $15,000 a week or $60,000 a month or $700,000 plus a year. And then you're going to have adjustments. You're going to have adjustments seasonally. People historically spend more money during holiday periods than they do during non-holiday periods. It only makes sense. If I'm off at Christmas and I'm going out to a restaurant with my family, I've got time. If I'm coming out of the office and I've got 45 minutes, I got to be giddy up, here I go, in and out. So my average spend is possibly going to be less. So don't guess these numbers. Go out and find out by observing. Look at the competition. Once you've come up with your revenue figure, which we, sort of settled on about $700,000 a year, you then have to decide, well, how much of that's going to be food? How much is beverage? And in the case of a licensed establishment, we're talking liquor, beer, draft beer, wine, non-alcoholic beverages. You've got to break all those down. You've got to look at catering sales. You got to look at takeout sales. Are you going to make up takeout sales a part of your everyday revenues? And each revenue source will have a different cost. We'll just use as an example food costs at around about 32%. If we're talking about beverage sales and we're a bar, well, your wine costs will be, in the mid to high 40s. Your liquor costs are going to be in the high 20s. Your beer is going to be probably in the low 30s, and your draft may be in the mid 30s. You control it. You control your costs, so you can decide ahead of time corporately what kind of product costs you want to have. Catering costs will obviously be a little bit lower because you know the numbers of people ahead of time. It could be that you offer a deal on takeout. So maybe you're going to run a higher cost on takeout because you're going to give them a break on price because there's no customer service involved and your labor costs are so much less. So in the financial forecast, you are going to have your revenue streams, all generating different levels of revenue. Then you're going to have your cost of goods sold, which is a percentage of sales. The best way to define what cost of goods sold is by taking something and figuring out what you paid for it, and then figure out what you sold it for, and then divide one into the other and take it as a percent. So if you paid $2 for an item that you sell for $6, and you take it as a percent, that is 1/3 of 100%, or 33%. That could be your target for food costs. So that means every item that you cost out, whether it be a burger or a salad or a dessert or a beverage, you multiply the cost times 3 to ensure that your costs are at 33%. Now, in an actual case, you're going to have different percentages for different menu items. You're going to have some entrees which may be high 30s. You may have some salads which are low 20s. You may have pasta or pizza which is high teens. You may have coffee which is 9%. So every item is going to come with a different cost of goods sold. We then have to deal with labor costs. And again, we don't guess this. This is your single biggest expense in 2015 and going forward is going to be labor cost, because this is the reality now, is that minimum wage is no longer low for your average worker, and even for working in a licensed establishment. No longer are people making small wages, they're making good wages. So you have to do up schedules in advance. We have identified that there are slow days and average days and busy days. We'll do up a schedule for a slow day, an average day, and a busy day. On a slow day, I have 2 servers at lunch, I got 1 in the afternoon, I've got 2 over dinner, and I got 1 late night. But on a busy day, I've got 3 over lunch, 2 in the afternoon, I've got 3 plus a hostess at dinner time, and I've got 2 late night. So if you're projecting your revenues, you can also project your labor costs ahead of time. Just figure out how many people you need, and then figure out what you're going to be paying them. Once you have that sort of mathematics done and you've come up with $10,000 a month in wages, well, then you add 8% for things like CPP, EI, WSIB, and vacation pay. So it's not $10,000, it's $10,800 is what your payroll is going to be. So you got your revenue, you know what your cost of goods sold is, you know what your labor cost is. That gives you your operational profit. From your operational profit, you lose more money. You lose rent, utilities, maintenance, credit card processing fees, marketing fees, professional fees, telecommunications, and on and on and on. And you can figure every single one of these things out ahead of time. You know how much money you're going to be paying in rent. You can go and ask the owner or ask the utility companies to figure that out. You know how much your maintenance is going to be because you got to get your garbage removed. I've got to clean up the parking lot. I got to do all that kind of stuff. I got to look after my equipment. I have to make an allowance for that. I got to clean the filters in my exhaust hood. I have to clean and replace the filters in my HVAC system. I've got credit card processing fees. 80% of my people are going to pay by credit or debit, and of those, 80% are going to pay by debit. So I can figure out what percentage I have to subtract off my revenues to account for the processing fees and the rental of the machine. Marketing. I'm going to allocate 4%, let's say, 3% of my revenues to marketing. And then professional fees for accounting. Someone has to do your financial statements at the end of the year. You may want to have a lawyer come in and review some leases or review contracts that you may have with people. And then your telecommunications, whether that be televisions or cell phones or whatever. Your financial forecast finishes off by telling you what your income's going to be. This is how much money you are generating on your bottom line before interest, depreciation, and taxes. And if you're great, you'll have a bottom line of somewhere between 10 and 20%. It really depends on your concept, depends on your menu, depends on your pricing strategy. But you control this. You can control it. You know how many people you need, so you got your labor down, you know what your rent are, you know what your fixed expenses are. So it comes down to you deciding how much money do you want to make. And of course you're going to have to pay yourself. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, I'll pay myself out of the income. No, pay yourself out of your revenues. If you are going to be paying a payroll every 2 weeks or a half month, well, include yourself in that. You're working hard. And if you pay yourself, when the yellow page guy comes around, you're less likely to get drawn into buying an ad that you don't need, because you have to make sure there's money left for yourself. Once you've got that financial forecast done and it has proven that your concept is viable, that there is money to be made, you then have to figure out, what does it cost me to get into this business? And this is the big question. What money do you really need? Not money that you think you need. What do you really need to get your restaurant up and operating? You have to identify all your costs. Think. You may have to have some design, which is presented to the city. You may have to pay for an architectural drawing or for some engineering drawings or for a stamp from a structural engineer or from an electrical engineer. Then, of course, you've got your capital improvements. Got to hire somebody, if you're not going to do it yourself, to go in and make all the changes and convert what was either an empty shell into a restaurant or what was an existing business into the restaurant you want. You've got to buy equipment, furniture, fixtures. You've got deposits you have to make not only on last month's rent, but also for utilities. You have to potentially put down a deposit for approvals. You have to pay some money to the city to give you an approval on your design. And then, of course, you have to pay for training. And we talked about this early on in concept. We talked about how your skill level and the skill level of your employees is paramount to your business's success. So set aside money to train you and to train your staff to make sure you're all ready to go.